All right, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to another broadcast with us here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Happy Valentine's Day, guys. It is a very special day, Ash Wednesday to those who celebrate as well, but we hope you love science as much as we do. It's why we're here. It's why we're in the midst of a truly epic week. Now, as you may have heard me say in the rest of our If Then series, every February for our entire time we've been an organization, we have spent the entire month only celebrating the most amazing women in science and exploration on planet Earth. We typically do like 55, 60 broadcasts this month. It's insane. We don't sleep at all. It's so much fun. But this year we are particularly thrilled because we've had the chance, as I said, to partner with the amazing folks at If Then. If Then is an initiative of the Lyda Hill Philanthropies. It is the greatest single celebration of women in science I think that there's ever been. And we've had the pleasure over the last 2 days of featuring 5 of their most amazing ambassadors. 125 people they celebrated with full-size statues, amazing events all over the US and beyond. And we're thrilled to feature everyone from cave divers, deep sea divers, National Geographic photographers, archaeologists, and more. So if you want to check out all their amazing resources, it's all right there. Join us for the rest of the series. We've got 2 more programs today and like 7 more in the next 2 days to come. So it's been a wild ride. Now, I'm so thrilled today because we are bringing on someone quite different from everyone we've had on over the last few days to kick us off. Dr. Jessica Taaffe is a Renaissance woman. She is a biomedical scientist whose work has taken her all over the world. She's had the chance to talk about the amazing stuff she does all over the world to help improve global health. But beyond that, she's a singer, she's a boxer, she's a dancer, she's done a little bit of everything. She's got the best hats in the world. I was just telling her before we went live, as we're bringing her on, all the other speakers, all the other ambassadors were like, oh, I hope she wears the best hat. So she's unhatted today, but that's okay. We know you can check her out online on her website and social media to see some of the amazing headgear that she's got on the go. Jessica, it's so nice to have you in today. I'm so excited to go on this journey. And without further ado, welcome to the broadcast. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. And I'm sorry I didn't bring any of my hats. It's a little awkward on Zoom, but I do have red lipstick on, that's another signature thing, a deep love of mine.
In the whole bios, when I was setting up the series, there's little intros for all the ambassadors on the If Then site, and rocks a bold red lip was the final thing of your bio. So I'm so excited that we are get to see that.
Gotta represent.
I know you've got a lot to share with us, so I'm going to stop talking and let you bring up all this great stuff you're going to tell us today, and I can't wait to get underway.
Excellent. All right, let's do this. All right, I assume you can see it?
We are good to go. Thank you so
much.
All
right. Well, thank you so much for having me today. Happy Valentine's Day. I'm going to talk about something that I deeply love, and that is fighting infectious diseases with biomedical science. So first of all, who am I? Jesse gave me a great intro, but let me tell you just a little more about my educational background, my professional background. So bottom line, I'm a biomedical scientist. I trained and have worked in the lab with diseases like HIV and malaria, studying them. I've looked at these diseases in monkeys. You can see some of the assays that I've done, the different kind of experiments where I've seen, parasites in different tissues inside the body. We've got to do cool assays where you light up different cells to look to see a response to a disease. This is me down here on the right, suited up before I went and worked with some of the monkeys. So true, I have worked in the lab on infectious diseases. But I'm also a global health professional. At some point, I left the lab. I don't currently work in the lab. And I wanted to apply biomedical science in the global health sphere. I've done a lot of different things. I've been a science communicator. I've been a consultant. I've worked in scientific program administration and working on program development for scientific programs and outreach for them. This work has taken me to the UN. I've worked for government agencies. I work for private clients as well. So I've done a lot of different stuff. So what got me into biomedical science and particularly infectious diseases? Well, everyone has gone through the global coronavirus pandemic. We all know about that. We know about COVID. Well, when I was in college, the first global coronavirus pandemic was happening. So that's me in college. I was taking my microbiology class. But at the time, I was taking a virology class. And so I was learning about different viruses, learning how they get into the body, how they make you sick. at the same time that across the world, there was a coronavirus that had just emerged. People didn't know about it. They just, in the same way that our current pandemic started, where people were getting sick, but we didn't know what it was. We thought it was something. And people were getting scared and kind of panicking. All the things that we felt, just a few years ago was happening. So I watched this little virus start in one part of the world and go to all these different places. And it was the same time I was learning about the biology of it. And I thought, wow, that's so cool. Like this, I think it's fascinating how this virus works biologically and what it does in your body, but also on the larger scale, how it affects populations of people. So it was at that point that was kind of my aha moment in saying, haha, I want to work on global infectious diseases. So that's what I decided to do with my career. And why do we care about infectious diseases? Why should you care? Well, of course, obviously, they make us sick, and who wants to get sick, right? But the fact is that there's a lot more infectious diseases that are happening. They're new ones, or diseases that we thought we had, conquered are coming back because of the pathogen. So a pathogen is basically the little microbe. It could be a virus or bacteria or fungus or parasite that causes the disease. And a lot of these things are coming back, or they're spreading because of various factors. So it could be the fact that we're traveling more and people move across populations, and people are migrating to different places, or diseases can travel on planes, or climate change can have effect on the pathogens, where the changing climate may allow for pathogens to live in different places, or even the things that we're doing to our environment, like taking down forests, may change where a mosquito may be, and some mosquitoes carry different pathogens that make people sick. There's so much that's going on that allows diseases to emerge. So because there's so many ways that diseases happen, and the pathogens infect people or move to different places, there's so many different ways that we can fight or control infectious diseases. And I say control because here's the thing: there's always going to be these diseases, right? So some of them we can get rid of, and some diseases we have, but not all of them we will. So what we try to do is minimize the amount of sickness that it causes. And there's a lot of different ways, right? So clinically, you could work in a hospital, or you could be a doctor, you can take medication. You can work in the environmental sector or enact environmental interventions, if mosquitoes are spreading different viral diseases, maybe if you change the environment, we remove water that mosquitoes are breeding in, we'll have less disease. Behavioral areas, right? So we all know about wearing masks, right? That helps prevent a lot of the respiratory infections like COVID. But a lot of people don't want to wear them. So how do we get people to wear these things, right? Epidemiological means there's ways that we, in order to understand where disease is and how it's moving around from person to person, we can track the movement of the disease among people. We look at data, policies, like the mask mandates, right? Is this an effective thing? If we make everybody wear masks, or even, policies that saying, oh, if you take this medication, then this is what we recommend for this disease. Now, my degree, I ended up getting my PhD and worked in my graduate school in the biomedical sector. And so this is when biomedical, you're thinking of the development of medicines and research in the lab and studying things. That's the area that I worked in, and that's the area that I chose how to fight infectious diseases. So what is biomedical science? Basically, you're studying health, disease, human development. I chose to study infectious diseases in this context. There's a lot of different ways, different subfields in it, things like genomics, where you study the DNA, the DNA signature of diseases, or in general, microbiology, molecular biology. I don't need to get into all of them, but there's different subfields, right? And what you get out of this is different ways to identify diseases, diagnostics. You get medicines, vaccines. Now, global health, because like I said in the beginning, I use biomedical science in global health. Global health is a much bigger field. It's the study of health on a larger scale. It's at the population base. It's like within the globe, right? And you can use other fields in this area. So like epidemiology, tracking data trends, social sciences that help us understand people's behavior and help us figure out ways to deliver interventions. And then eventually that's what you want, right? It's not just about giving a vaccine. It's about how do we give a vaccine to an entire population, right? So that's kind of what those different fields are. But how do we use it, right? Like, so what are the type of problems you might be working on? Well, so in biomedical science, the questions that I would ask would be, well, why does this certain pathogen, why does this virus make people sick? What does the body do when it's infected, right? In global health, it's again broader. So we think about, okay, we know this pathogen makes people sick, but like, how do we prevent disease and take better care of people with the disease in different populations, right? So it's like, okay, we can give a vaccine, but how do we do it? Like if it's a certain medicine that people need to take, if they take it orally, that's easier for them to do it than like giving a shot. Because some people don't like shots. So we try to, it's different questions, but again, you're always trying to fight disease. Okay, so if you want to fight infectious diseases, there's 3 major things you need to be doing and thinking about. Preventing disease, obviously. No one wants to get sick. No one wants to get infected with anything, right? That makes them sick. If you can't do that, then you've got to be able to identify the disease, right? Like if you want to treat the disease, you need to be able to know what you're sick with, so you know what to treat it with. So that's diagnosis. And even in a larger scale, when you're looking population-based, you've got to be able to see where the disease is happening, in what populations. So once you're able to detect the disease, you obviously want to treat it. Okay, so how does biomedical science address these main areas? Well, first of all, biomedical science, there's a lot of research that helps each of these different areas. And then the different products that come out of it, the outcomes. So prevention, well, vaccines and antimicrobials can reduce your risk of infection or disease. In terms of detecting and diagnosing disease, biomedical science is responsible for a lot of the tests that you do in lab, the genomic sequencing of different diseases and pathogens, and of course the treatment. All the medicines that we get to treat different diseases come out of biomedical science and biomedical research. Okay, now so right now I'm going to give you some examples of the prevention, diagnosis, and detection, and then the treatment, and ways that I want to say that, like, I think biomedical science has been critical and big wins. So the first one, the mRNA coronavirus vaccine that maybe a lot of you have gotten against COVID, that was a huge win for prevention, and that was a result of biomedical science. Now, why, right? Okay. In general, we have vaccines. You probably have had a lot. They help prevent disease. You can get them as a kid. Some of them you have to get throughout your life or different stages of your life. Some of them, like the Ebola vaccine, would only happen if there was an outbreak. That's not something you're necessarily going to be exposed to, but they have them available. There's a lot of examples of approved vaccines that we have already made. When the COVID vaccine came out, there was not already a DNA or RNA vaccine. And what this is just it's a different flavor of vaccine. If you think of vaccines as different cakes, it's a different type of cake. Like we're talking about an angel food cake versus a cheesecake. And it's just, maybe this was the cheesecake and no one had made a cheesecake had that out yet, right? And then you just change the flavors for the different disease. Well, no one had made a DNA or RNA vaccine. And I know a lot of people think, wow, well, how did we get this vaccine? I mean, within a year after this pandemic started, right? Well, it's because the biomedical researchers had been studying this type of vaccine, how to make this type of vaccine for, since 1961, basically, when they learned what mRNA was, this nucleic acid that is the basis of the vaccine. And they'd already been trying to play around with, like, how do we make this cake, with this, right? So they'd been doing that for a long time. So by the time COVID came about, they had done a lot already to know that maybe we can try this vaccine in this situation. And not only were they studying, how to make the cake, but they were studying the virus, right? The flavor, how we were going to put that into the cake, that flavor of cake. And since 2002, that was the pandemic, the first coronavirus pandemic I told you about. They knew a lot about coronaviruses, this pathogen, this virus, so that when SARS-CoV-2 came out, it was really easy to go in there and say, okay, here's what we need to target. This is what we need to make a vaccine against. So the research was already done. Huge win for biomedical science in terms of prevention and vaccines. So detection. So also I'm going to use COVID as an example here, because in terms of diagnostics and detection, biomedical science is also really critical with genomic surveillance and detection of COVID virus. So when you think about diagnosing disease, right, you're sick, you go to the doctor. The doctor will ask you about your symptoms. He or she will do a physical exam, right? So there's that part of it. And then after they get a little information, usually they may ask for a test. And these are lab-based tests. This is biomedical science, the basis of it that created these tests. And these different ways of detecting pathogens could be direct. You're going to be able to use a microscope and look directly and see a parasite in a blood smear on a slide. DNA sequencing actually will read out the code, the DNA of different pathogens and let you know what it is. You can culture, you can grow it, and then you'll see it on you can see the bacterial growth in this little culture, and we know what it is. So there's different technologies that can be used. DNA is really important. Oops. And on the right here, these lateral tests, these are antibody-based tests. You're probably familiar with that because of COVID, right? You probably all taken those nasal swabs, right? Well, it's biomedical science that was helped develop these type of tests to identify pathogens. And like I said, you're familiar with the rapid antigen test, where you take a swab, you put it on this little cassette, it tells you if it's positive, negative. That is all biomedical science, immunology based. And then, the DNA sequencing is also really important. That is where, like I said, you can take a swab and then you can put the sample into a machine that basically reads the genetic code of that sample of whatever's in there. And that was done for COVID. Now, it was super important and it still is super important in our monitoring of COVID currently and before, because, like I said, these machines, you put the sample into the machine and it gives you this readout of, it's a code, a certain signature of each whatever's in that sample, right? And what you can see is that there's, 4 different readouts, 4 different codes, and one of them is slightly different. It's different color. And what it means is that in that different color, it kind of changes the signature, the characteristics of what that virus is. And so the first 3 are this blue color because they act one way. And then the 4th, because there's been this change, this mutation in its code, it acts differently. And what you can see is that, when you're attaching that code to different people, you can see how they move from person to person, right? So if, one person, all these other people start out with like maybe a blue and then they turn yellow because they all have the same kind of signature of their virus. You understand how it moves and how it changes through time. And that's how we've known about the different variants, different strains of COVID that have come about. So this is all biomedical science that is doing this. So super important for us to understand how the virus is changing and where it's going. And then so we know how to combat it. Okay, my last example is HIV antivirals. Another biomedical success story. And the reason why is that in 1981, the first case of human immunodeficiency virus was reported in the United States. By 1985, we had one medicine that could help treat this devastating disease that was killing people. Now, and throughout the years, you can just see how many new drugs have been added. And it's amazing, because the reason why we have so many drugs is because of the research that's been going on to understand HIV, to understand its life cycle, and how we can prevent the virus from doing the things in its body that gets you sick. So again, biomedical science is responsible for understanding how HIV gets in your body, the different steps it has to do before it can replicate, create more virus. So it has to attach to a cell in your body. It has to fuse with it. It has to get in there. It has to deposit its contents. Then it has to basically do a readout, copy its nucleic acid, and then it has to integrate into your body's cell, into the DNA of your body's cell. So there's all these different steps, and because we know how those work, we can make drugs that stop them at those different areas. And here on the right, you just see all the different drugs for some of the different stages of the life cycle of this virus. So super, super important that biomedical science and biomedical research has been enabled to give all these drugs to people that live with HIV so that they don't get sick from it. And this is one of my last slides. I have this here to say, I started this in the beginning saying, I'm a biomedical scientist. I'm a global health professional. I've had so many different roles. Like I started in biomedical science, but I've been a science writer. I've been a science communicator. I was on YouTube for a while doing like an online podcast. I've clearly worked in the lab with monkeys, had to suit up against them. I've done lab research. I've done research that's just about reading papers. I've been a technical expert, having to be, the person that knows about this disease and has to tell other policymakers about it. I have worked in scientific administration, trying to promote different programs to help research and science move forward. I've been a consultant, so I have done I've had different roles with my biomedical science background, and I've worked even in different areas outside of biomedical science, outside of the lab work that I've done. So I say this because you may think that, I'm going to, work in a lab and then that's what I have to do, or I'm going to be a scientist. There's so many ways you can use science outside of the lab or outside of your original training, because in all these positions, I had to use my understanding of science. I just did it in different ways. So one of my final messages are just to say, look, whatever you're interested, follow it, but you can make your own path. I definitely did in working in all these different roles. And my goal was always, to help change the world, to do better things in it. But in my own way that felt genuine to me. And finally, to say, you can see how much I love and appreciate biomedical science and its role in global health and in fighting infectious diseases. And I really think, my goodness, biomedical scientists are our major heroes, right? I think they were heroes in the COVID pandemic. I think they're continually heroes in all of the things that they do to fight disease. So, I'll stop here and see if anyone has any questions.
Well, first and foremost, Dr. Jessica, thank you so much for that wild ride. I know you could have gone a lot longer in that talk, but what an incredibly diverse and varied career you've had. And I completely agree, by the way. The COVID pandemic was the ultimate sort of illustration of the importance of biomedical research, of doctors, of scientists around the globe. It's right up there with the moon landing. It's the speed and effectiveness at which we created that vaccine, got it out to billions of people, and saved, I think there was a recent analysis where it was in the tens of millions of lives with those vaccines. And that is remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's anyway, I know we all lived through it, but it's nice to hear the success story sort of out the other side a little bit. We got a great question from one of our classes online. So they wanted to know if AI is playing a role in improving biomedicine in any way? Are we better at sort of getting these DNA samples and assessing anything that we're doing with artificial intelligence in any way that you know of?
I can't comment on that, but I did work. So I was an outreach lead. I worked on a tuberculosis program that was using big data and trying to use like machine learning, AI, to try to get better for diagnostics and stuff. And the one way I can say that I think it's really fascinating is through imaging. So not so much like through genomic stuff that's a part of it, but is taking X-rays. So with tuberculosis, if someone suspects that you have tuberculosis, you've got to get an X-ray. And there's a certain signature. And I don't know if anyone's ever seen a chest X-ray or even just various medical images that really like only the doctors, the specialists understand what it looks like. Because you're just like, oh, that looks cloudy. But there's a certain way it looks that the specialist can see. So people are actually trying to make this automated by feeding a lot of images to machine learning algorithms, trying to, to create this AI so that there is automated detection of TB through X-rays. So that, because so like TB happens in a lot of places in the world that just may not have the resources that we have to go to a clinic and go to a hospital to get this done. And so there are things like mobile clinics that can go around, basically put a chest X-ray machine into a van and go to different villages or different small towns where people can get checked out. Or, these places may not have the specialists that read that. So if you can automate it, which, like I said, there's work getting done in it, this could definitely improve health. So I don't know if something's been approved. If maybe it's still like early in development. It's not like widespread, but it is really cool.
I was going to say all AI is early in development. Like we are in the wild west of this field where it's the first 5-10 years of things really starting to come. But I'm so glad you mentioned this. Incidentally, the last time we had X-rays talked about on this broadcast was for a person who scanned mummies with them. So there's a very different use of technology. TB, I want to harp on this for a minute because I think a lot of kids growing up, you hear about HIV, we certainly know about COVID, and TB was something that when I grew up, I was like, this is like an old disease. This doesn't exist anymore. This is not something we deal with. And can you speak to sort of the prevalence of this in the world and sort of how maybe Canada and the US and places that like we don't see it that much here or we don't hear about it very much here? Tell us the story.
No, and it is. I mean, it's like one of the major big diseases infectious diseases in the world that affects a whole bunch of people. I mean, yeah, we think about HIV, but TB is definitely one of them. We don't have it as much here in the US. It's a disease that's you find it a lot with in environments where people the conditions aren't really great. Like maybe there's poor air quality or people that are living really in close quarters. In a lot of impoverished environments. And so you will find that in different places of the world, not so much here. I mean, it's funny, right? Because so recently I was diagnosed with pneumonia. I mean, I'm fine. It wasn't anything bad. I mean, but I say that because I went to the doctor. I mean, honestly, it was just a few weeks ago and I'd been fine. I didn't like have a fever and stuff. So I didn't know what I thought. I was like, maybe it's bronchitis. And the doctor, I did a telehealth appointment and they were like, I think based on your symptoms, you should go get a chest X-ray. And I thought immediately to myself, because I'm I worked in infectious disease. I worked in TB. I was like, do you think I have TB? He's like, no, it's not that common here. I was like, well, I mean, I do travel, right? Like it's possible. And I thought about the symptoms. I'm like, well, like I had chills. Yeah, I did. I had some night sweats. That could have been TB. I hadn't been coughing. Like it all went through my head, even though like, yes, I live in the United States.
Yeah.
But I've traveled to places where you can get it. I don't spend a lot of time there, but like it did go through my head. Now I know my husband thinks like I get a little paranoid about that stuff, but I'm like, it is possible.
It is possible, and especially someone in your role who's going to the places you're going. So yes, I'm glad you're on the mend, and that was an unexpected place to take that question. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was just like I literally thought, yeah, I could get TB, but the doctor was like, no. I mean, and that just said, because it's not really common here.
Yes.
We're lucky that we don't have that.
We are lucky. And to sort of segue this into a disease that we have actually wiped out, can you tell a little bit about smallpox? Because I consider this one of the greatest stories in all of the history of global health. And I think a lot of our kids certainly don't know it because it was literally eradicated before their lifetime. So
yeah, no. I mean, and that was because, like, you're talking about vaccines. We had a smallpox vaccine that was able to go, and we had like a mass global vaccination campaign that we were able to vaccinate enough people to basically get rid of the disease globally. And like, you're right, people don't know about it as much because it's not like you don't see it anymore, right?
Like you're sort of a victim of your own success in the media because it's done. But this was the greatest health accomplishment ever possibly. I mean, smallpox quite possibly killed more people than any disease in history, and we got rid of it. And that is the all-time triumph of medicine and mankind. It's very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the ultimate goal of vaccines, right? I mean, for the diseases that have the characteristics to enable that sort of success, right? Like some of them, it's just they spread before you can catch them, right? Like that's or that, you know, like with a lot of respiratory diseases, like by the time that someone's getting sick, like it's already been passed on, so it's hard to isolate people.
We lived through this, like sort of it's been funny in the few broadcasts that we've had talking about respiratory diseases because like everyone is familiar now. Like we all know. I mean, I think I've had COVID 4 times and I went out of my way to not get COVID, right? Like, so on the vaccine note, because I want to harp on this, and I think it's a very important question one of our classes sent in, is for someone who's hesitant about vaccines. I'm sure you've had to answer this question a lot in person and virtually. What would you tell someone who's nervous about a vaccine in any way?
I would ask why. That would be my first question. Like, what is it, right? Like, because some people are afraid of shots, or they're afraid of maybe what's in the vaccine, or like, and I think, like, for instance, with the mRNA vaccines, because they're new vaccines, people are nervous about, like, well, it hasn't been around a lot, you know, and this is new. And I think that's why I spoke to the fact that there was so much research done, because I think people think that, wow, like, you just put this out exactly in a year. And I would say, well, no, but like this has been in testing for a long time. And yes, absolutely. Like, to be completely clear, there's a limit to what we know because it hasn't been administered in like mass as it has been. And we're still learning. And that's science in general. You're constantly learning, especially in health science. So like I said, I would want to understand why they are, but I would say, look, there's so many vaccines out there that are safe. We have years of data to say this. And you know what? I think that you need, like, everybody has to make that decision for themselves. Truly, it is a personal decision, but try to look at the benefits versus the costs, right? Let's say with measles right now, you know, like, I think there's been a lot of people not wanting to vaccinate. They have fears for whatever reason against that vaccine. And 10 years ago, that was safer maybe not to take that vaccine because there wasn't as much measles. And now we're seeing measles outbreak, and measles is a terrible disease. Yeah. So, you know, you just have to think, well, or like with COVID, you can choose not to get the vaccine, and that's your prerogative. But it does put you more at risk of serious infections. So how comfortable do you feel with that risk? How comfortable do you feel for yourself? How comfortable do you feel around your family? So I think that's, like I said, I would be curious about it. But I do think it's about outweighing the risks and benefits of it. But vaccines are safe. And
it's a fantastic answer, and there's a lot of nuance in there. We've had a lot of vaccine scientists on. Certainly in the midst of the pandemic, we brought a lot of people on. And one thing that we kept coming back to is the idea that, you know, if you're like me, I'm very low risk of dying from something like COVID. But I could be laid low for a week, and I don't want to be laid low for a week because I want to do more broadcasts with amazing people like you. And if I give it to someone who is at risk, I could be putting them in harm's way for serious illness or death. And, you know, for a free shot that I can go to my local pharmacy 5 minutes down the road and get, it's an easy decision.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I've worked on flu vaccines, and that's another good example of like, and here, you know, that is a vaccine because of the way that it's made, is not as effective as, like, say, other vaccines, and you have to take it every year. But like you said, the way I look at it, I'm like, all right, even if it's 50% effective, it is free. Maybe the most I get is like a little arm pain. I'm lucky I don't have a reaction to it or anything like that. And is that worth it for me? Yeah, because I don't want to be sick. I really don't.
I like wellness. Wellness is great.
Right.
Lower stakes question. What is your favorite part of your job? We've been getting this a lot during this series, so I'm always glad when we get this. And you have a lot to possibly choose from here, so I'm really curious your answer.
I love learning new stuff all the time. I love taking information and putting it together and trying to make sense of it. Like, what do we do with this information? I love, going to the scientific literature and understanding and say, okay, cool. So now what, right? Like, and I am doing that a lot with my job of, okay, so here's the scientific information we have on this disease. Well, like, what do we do with that? How do we use that to improve health? It could be, what vaccines do we recommend to different people? Not even different people, is like I said, in the global sphere. And so I had to kind of think of the larger context of saying, like, well, let's just say there's a new vaccine out there for, whatever disease it may be. Is that going to work in that country? So this is an issue. I mean, we saw it during COVID, say with like mRNA vaccines, there's this new vaccine out there. But one, can we get it to the other countries? There are the logistics of it, of like, well, do we have to store it in certain conditions that are not going to work in various places that just don't support those conditions? Do the people want it? So it's not just about like the scientific, the biological questions of like, will it work? It's also, will people take it? So it's super complex, and I love taking all of that information and trying to make sense of it and tell the people how, what we can do with it.
What a beautiful answer. Curiosity and being excited about new discoveries has been like the unifying theme, no matter what discipline our people have been in the whole If Then series. So I'm so glad we continued that trend, Jessica. I've got two more questions. Time flies and you're having fun in these broadcasts. So one is, I think, could be easy. You, again, we highlighted at the beginning, you do a lot of artsy things. And I'm really curious if that plays a role in the science that you do, or if it's separate and you're excited for it for that reason, or anything you want to share about your artsy things you get up to.
I mean, it's separate. I don't incorporate necessarily into my job. I mean, I think, when I've had to do science communication to some extent, I mean, I feel like it's not just about understanding the information. It's about how you communicate it. And that's kind of just a different skill. For me, it's just a break, I think. But the other piece of it is that, I think art is a lot about presentation, how you present yourself, how you communicate, through whatever media it may be. And I think that's important for, like, let's just say for science communication, or even in like the technical stuff that I do now, I still have to talk to other people about it. So I think it comes out in that way, and it helps you be a little more creative, think sort of outside the box. I think it helps me just have broader perspective, which is super important in the work that I do. But the other thing, like kind of fun thing about it, is I think I've met other people through it, right? I have gravitated towards other scientists that like to do maybe artsy things and stuff. And so they're kind of kindred spirit, and they tend to be some of the most innovative people. Like, they're really cool. And I know you're having many of them on. I know you're having Dr. Crystal Dilworth on, a very good friend of mine. Yeah, she's coming. And like, I just think we get each other, and we support each other. So I think it's really just allowed a kinship with other scientists.
It's a really beautiful answer. Crystal's coming on like an hour and a half, by the way. So the neuroscience of love today. But it's the creative approach that I think is so important. I think a lot of kids come up thinking that scientists wear lab coats all the time, and they look at beakers with colored fluid, and that is what a scientist is, and you have no other interest. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I'm a scientist by background. I live for science communication. And if I were to tell kids what to do in school, it would be take art, like do music, do art, draw, dance, whatever, because it will make you a better thinker, a more well-rounded person. And it's so much of the joy in life comes through that. So I'm so glad we talked about that.
I agree. And, I think people don't realize that, like, art is also can be very technical as well. Yes. So I think we try to put them in different categories, but I think that's also what makes us, maybe excel in the others, because we take kind of the discipline, the technical pursuit of, that structure of thinking, and we apply it to our art. For me, I would say, like, as a musician, as a singer, it's like, I mean, you look at the different notes and what is how much net space, but like, what is the difference between this note and the other one? Like, you can measure that. There are ways of measuring it. And like, how do you get pitch? Like, music is very technical, or in terms of keeping a beat, people don't think about it. They're just like, oh, it's so creative and just so but no, I mean, like, that is absolutely a thing about it. But you could say the same thing about science when you start dreaming up different ideas. It's, you have these big ideas, but then you kind of have to maybe bring it back and say, okay, well, how do that's the cool, fluffy, nice idea, but like, how do we do this? Like, step by step, let's break it down. What are the questions we're answering? So I don't like that people separate it, because there's technical and creative parts of both of them.
Well, and this is reflected in so STEM has sort of morphed into STEAM, where the arts get sort of thrown into, right? And there's a reason for that. And so that was a lovely answer. Thank you. Listen, no one knows about the technicality of art more than me. I once drew a stick person. That's the extent of my artistic talent. I keep trying to do better, and it just keeps failing and failing. I'm going to highlight, again, we've got one more question before we go. I want to stress for all our audience, check out the rest of the If Then series. If you want to catch Crystal's broadcast, if you want to catch any of our other programs, they're all there. If Then She Can is the greatest resources I've ever seen of any organization ever. So really lots of great stuff there. And if you want to learn more about Dr. Jessica, you can check all that out below, social media and her website. We're going to wrap up with one final question, which is in the biomedical sphere, there's a lot of good information. There's a lot of bad information out there. For people that are going online, where would you send them for trustworthy information about things like vaccines, health? Is there anything that jumps out?
Yes. Okay. So, like, I can recommend an account that I follow that I think is really good on Instagram. It's called Unbiased Science. I think that's what it is. They're really, really great. Incredibly evidence-based. They have some opinions, so I think that will come out, but I think everything is very researched in what they say, and they try to debunk a lot of information that is out there, like from the wellness industry, or talking about like toxins and things. And so they will talk about the evidence that is or isn't there to support what people are saying. I think another really good place to go, and I understand that some people have lost trust in some of our governmental health institutions, public health institutions, such as like CDC, but I still think these are places that you can go. WHO is another place that has, all evidence-based of that. That is what they do. They make recommendations based on the information out. They have many experts that weigh in, and this is coming from all over the world. So those are important places to go. Like I said, I know people have some different thoughts about it, but that I trust that.
It's the world's doctors and scientists working together for the purposes of public health. Like, if there's anyone, I know trust is a bit of a issue these days, but like, truly, there's no better organizations than those for that sort of information. And I'll say to all our groups, classes, wherever you're joining from, talk to a librarian. Go to a public library, go to university library. Librarians will help you navigate through that information. That's literally what they're trained to do. Not at all biased, because my wife's a librarian at all. But I really encourage you to talk to those people. Your teachers are pretty much good for finding great, accurate information. So I'm glad we got that question. Jessica, thank you so much for spending time with us today. I know you've got a lot to do saving the world, so we're going to let you go in a minute, but really appreciate you joining us. And again, I hope people take the chance to check out the entire If Then series, catch this program on YouTube, share with their family and friends, lots to explore and discover. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And yeah, please reach out, everyone, if you have questions or, interest in what I do.